You're listening to the Back Home Network, presented by Home Field Apparel.
What physical basketball is versus
You
physical fouling.
You watch it on YouTube. Anyway. I saw the game. I watched the game.
Well, we're here. I'm Bob Moats. Welcome to X's and Joe's, a podcast dedicated to decoding the winning formula in college basketball.
And I'm Mike Weemuth. Welcome you to episode 17, College Football 2024. Can Bob and Mike organize a coherent episode on a sport that isn't basketball?
I just put down the football show, but I love you. I love the title. That's.
No, I think it's important to set expectations, right where they should be at the very beginning. So,
when I first met my wife, I said, I'm going to put the bar on the ground. And if I step over without tripping, it's going to look impressive.
Exactly. It's always about the gap. That's all that matters. It's the gap. Yeah.
And really, I can also say I'll just put it in the ground, bury it in a hole, put dirt on packing and walk over, and I'm still getting over the bar. Yeah,
exactly.
I like it. Let's set the expectation.
Exactly. And this is recorded on the evening of September 16th, 2024.
Which reminds me, it's September, the great, the month made famous by Earth, Wind, and Fire. Which is that a 70s song you can get into?
I like that song just because, me, I love the fall. And whenever it turns, like I always say, the kickoff of the college football season and the confetti falling, or actually, let's say the one shining moment being sung on CBS, that's like where my happy zone is for the year. Everything outside of that is like, I just would rather go into a coma if possible. But like once college football season kicks off and you get into like Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and all the sports that are attendant to that, then that's my happy zone. So I love that song because the local Philly radio stations play that once like September hits.
Yeah, my son has been woken up to it, as some of you may know. He just celebrated his second birthday. Yeah. Which, every morning for his wake up music through the month of September, it's his birthday song is played, which is September by Earth, Wind, and Fire. Because nothing is like waking up to that song.
It is very inspiring. That's a good choice.
But I think only cool kids are born in September, right, Mike? Because I think happy belated birthday to you, my friend.
Thank you. Yeah. Yesterday was my birthday on the 15th. So I was going through that on Facebook. It's like me, Dan Marino, Marco Polo. Who else? It was like William Howard Taft and Mr. Burns from The Simpsons.
If you could think of 4 nefarious characters in history that you could share a birthday with, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I love doing that just because it's funny just seeing the hilarious combinations of people and sometimes animals that are born on your birthday. It's like some people, it's like, I share a birthday with Imelda Marcos and Secretariat.
They have shoes in common. Random. Really good. Like, yeah.
It's like, complete grab bag of potential people in history that you could have been just happened to born on the same day as they did.
Yeah, it's and then kind of just check your zodiac sign and just go, boy, am I really in trouble in life? I may have been born with 2 strikes in the hole.
Yeah, exactly.
So as he says, Mr. Burns, excellent.
Excellent. Yeah.
So with September, we know college basketball is right around the corner. And so we're rapidly getting towards what we would consider season 2 of X's and Joe's. The second basketball season. Much like the TV show Angie said in Philadelphia, we were kind of a mid-season start, and now we're going into our second season where, Doris Roberts and Donna Pesco and Robert Hayes can do their thing. Bet this is the first college basketball or sports podcast to ever reference that TV show.
Exactly.
Ding.
We're always breaking new ground here.
Breaking new ground.
Really obscure references.
What do we say about that bar again?
Yeah.
But no, so we're thinking because we many of you may have just picked up on the idea or heard us say we kind of developed a historic arc over the course of the summer. We kind of delved into some historical basically how history impacts your current, where you are as a program currently. As we're kind of going into this season, knowing full well that there's going to be a lot of volatility would be a good word to use. Wouldn't you agree, Mike?
Yeah, exactly. No, I've been saying in the portal and NIL era, like the first word I think of is volatility.
I mean, conference realignment alone, and that's something, just all these things that we're kind of looking at. And, one thing that we look at a lot is, the impact of fandom on programs and what that looks like and how that's evolving, especially as we're, seeing our generation, Mike and I have Gen Xers now becoming the old guys in the fan base. We're the ones who are, telling the kids to sit down and shut up, or no, we're actually telling them to stand up and cheer. I mean, I've noticed myself, I go, hey, stand up, young people.
Yeah.
But looking at the idea of objective and rational fandom, versus, I know it's an area, Mike, that's one of your favorite areas to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, basic fan psychology, but we'll be having an episode or two probably in the coming months, during the season where we'll explore, themes related to that. Basically, what does it mean to be a fan, and how do fans differ in terms of their interpretation of what their quote unquote role is? I think it's timely just because of what I see on social media, we all see, and especially like what happened back in this last season, when we get into literally where the coach is like discussing like true fandom and all that. It's like, ooh, that's I think it's a topic we're gonna have to like talk a little bit more about, like at an analytical level, not try to get into like the whole like tribal, like, no, I'm on team on team true fan versus team, it's not that. It's literally just like looking at an analytical level and say, okay, well, how do you get there in terms of these kind of like conflicts? And so I think it would be a good opportunity to kind of explore that, on the show.
I mean, if you follow Message Board Geniuses, which is probably one of the, other than 3 or Letterman, it's one of the funniest one of the funniest sports-ish Twitter X follows out there. You read those and you get the idea that maybe as much as we think we're nuts, everybody else is crazy too.
Oh yeah.
And I think UCLA is kind of, and USC, Oregon, and Washington are all finding out pretty quickly. They thought they had an A game in the Pac-12. No.
Yeah.
When the Oregon Ducks showed up.
Yeah. Yeah. That was cute.
That was cute. Yeah, exactly. And so from fandom, how that's, and also how it also, again, how it's impact, because now fans are more and more, I think, becoming, I would say, more essential to programs at a time where it's harder and harder to get people's attention. Yeah.
Well, especially with the money involved now. I mean, fans can have a direct impact, with financial contributions in ways that it was more indirect, let's say, in the past. You could give to the school and the school could kind of like, give money how they saw. But now you can literally get money right into the hands of players, as directly as, or more directly than you ever could in the past.
Right. If you really want Gabe Cups to wish your wife a happy birthday, there's a market for it. And the money goes directly to the Gabe Cups Hanging Out Fund.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's that one. We're also one thing, and this was kind of coming off the Discord, as we've gotten some questions and in some dialogue on the idea of concept or really systems in basketball and the evolution of systems. And I think as I've been kind of going into my season across the street at the elementary school and thinking about what I want to do with the kids, but also just where the game's going as I'm talking to coaches at various levels of the game, the idea of concept evolution and system evolution in basketball and what we're seeing now in how programs are structuring themselves, where there's almost a death, I would say, or kind of a devolution on one end where you're looking at structure is not the same thing. And it's funny, we're doing the football show right now because there are those who are wondering, well, what is RPO? Is it anything like triple option?
Yeah.
Sort of mindsets. People are kind of, you hear people pining for the flex bone or the wishbone or the power eye.
Yeah.
In a world where pretty much everyone's running some sort of spread set. And just looking at it from a basketball lens of how are programs really organizing themselves philosophically on the offensive and defensive ends, creating identities that are less built on what system they're running and more on what they value.
Yeah.
And that really kind of principles of play and constructs versus, well, they're a flex team or they're running shuffle, or this is a team that's running UCLA high post, what this actually is looking like for programs. And I think it really kind of delves a lot with Mike and what you talk about with, when we talk about player skill sets.
Right. Yeah. Like matching them up to whatever concepts you're running. And yeah, I think you're right. When I hear people, let's say, criticize like a particular coach, not just like in Indiana, but any other place, they will oftentimes point to some other coach, and sometimes not even one that's currently in the game. It might be in the past. And they'll say, well, why can't we run what they ran? They run this system, that system worked. So why can't we do that? And so I think you're right. I think it's good. And I know this is a topic you've talked about a lot, just between us and, and amongst our friends. But yeah, that division of systems versus concept, I think, is one that I don't think a lot of people maybe appreciate. And I think we could really squeeze a good episode or two just out of that. Like, okay, well, what are people actually doing now? If they're not running X, then what are they doing to actually get their players in the right position to score or stop people from scoring?
And really, it's as we're getting more into, and really it's just as we're getting more athletic, just better athletes.
Right.
How you set them up and the pace of the game, how we're setting up the pace of the game. And I don't care what you're looking at, whether it's basketball, whether it's football, whether it's soccer, hockey. You look at baseball and the changes that have happened in baseball in the last 25, 30 years. And it's not all, and you can say, well, it's all analytics driven. Yes and no. Some of it's also the fact that, there's a reason why you don't see a whole lot of teams running flex over and over and over again to get an open layup.
Yeah.
You just can't, because kids are faster, they're stronger, and they're able to deal with it more effectively. Much like you don't see a whole lot of teams, putting a power I in the backfield and saying, okay, we've got two big dudes from the University of Nebraska and a tailback that's going to run it 40 times.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's, power sweep left, power sweep right, triple option left, and let's punt. So those are some, those are a couple, and plus we're going to be really kind of looking throughout at the portal and doing updates as to what we're seeing with teams that went heavy in the portal, teams that may not have gone as heavy in the portal, and really evaluating how their evaluations impacted what's happening on the floor.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're going to talk about Indiana. We're in Indiana. We're two Indiana guys. This is an Indiana, but at the same time, we also want to have a lot of compare and contrast. So we're looking forward to another great, just kind of that. And as always, love interacting with you all as much as possible. And if you haven't done a like or subscribe yet, please do so. And that way you can keep up with us every couple of weeks when we decide to get together and do these things.
Yeah. And we'll some guests too. We'll some more.
Oh yeah.
We'll probably some repeat guests, but also some newbies, so we'll probably about every second or third show, I think we might be having some kind of like interaction with someone that's not either of us. So
yeah. I mean, Mike is kind of tired of looking at my face, to be perfectly honest. I get tired of looking at my face. What am I talking about? So, and our faces wouldn't be on here if not for the wonderful sponsorship of Home Field Apparel, your one-stop shop for multiple programs and unique designs for in clothing for your school or pro team. Knowing that Alex Pillow just, I believe, won the IndyCar championship. I know they have an Aero McLaren line as well. And for you Colts fans out there who still want to be seen in public, they do have some good Colts stuff as well.
Yeah. And the coaches' jackets, don't forget those.
Can't forget the coaches' jackets and the dad hats. I mean, really, it's so for those of you who are again looking to just expand your wardrobe collection, whether it's for your school or for somebody else's, www.homefieldapparel.com.
Yep. And when we come back on X's and Joe's, Bob and I will jump right in. We'll discuss first our background in football. How did we actually get interested in the sport, and how have we actually participated in the sport before? Coming up next.
And welcome back. Mike, you used the term participated in my case. I think participated is being very generous to my 3 years of playing junior high and high school football.
Yeah, well, you are, participation can take many forms, Bob. So,
they gave me pads and a helmet, and they let me go out there and just get the crap knocked out of me. That was pretty much, wait a
minute, just before we go on, are there pictures of this?
There are some limited photos that I think I've not seen in a long time. There's me and some team photos with a jersey.
Okay.
I'm sure, I'm sure that they're out there and, available for everyone to.
So you're saying I need to email Virginia and ask her to go in the attic to track those down?
Yeah. And she has a friend now who is my 8th grade football coach. So, he might actually have some old memorabilia that's just floating around. He was very kind to give my son his second football, who he shot through the hoop. We're still working on, we're still working on which ball goes done for what, but as long as he's using the balls for something, he's good.
That's good.
But no, I mean, I think you and I both growing up, when we grew up, where we grew up, and with kind of the ages of the people that were here. Like I'm a Columbus East High School graduate.
Yeah.
So to say Columbus East High School in the late 70s without bringing up Blair Keel.
Yeah.
Who was, again, an amazing,
high school American, Notre Dame, all that
guy, almost won a national championship under center for Notre Dame. And then Jerry Faust took the program over and somehow created a quarterback controversy that never should have been. No offense to Steve Berline.
Yeah. So you're saying you shouldn't hire a high school football coach to lead one of the biggest brands in the history of the sport.
Is that a loaded question for IU fans?
No.
Should you avoid?
Yeah. No, I will say Moeller High School in Cincinnati, where
college,
where he came from. I mean, that was like the power school back then. But and I'm just saying that just in general that you need a little bit more of a resume built out before that. So
I think all the big red machines all sent their kids to Moeller, which makes you look really, really good when you have that sort of talent running through.
That's where Ken Griffey Jr. went to.
Ken Griffey Jr., Eduardo Perez, Petey Rose Jr. I mean, that was a whole. I mean, there's a story about about how all that kind of came together, and they all ended up being amazing. But no, growing up in Columbus, you had Blair Keel. We always had. I mean, we've had pretty good high school football here at both Columbus North and Columbus East. Columbus East has multiple state championships since its inception 50 years ago.
Yeah.
Various classes. I think for you in Terre Haute, you were there at a very unique time and had a very strong connection in Indiana.
It's perfect. Yeah, it was perfect timing for me. I mean, I wasn't really even that interested in football in my young days. I mean, before the age of 10, I kind of followed it, but I didn't really care for it. I was much more a basketball person. But my first well-formed memory of the sport or just watching it reasonably actively was when Anthony Thompson first started playing at Terre Haute North in the mid 80s. Ironically, both of my brothers, Rob and Jay, they played for Terre Haute North on the football team around that time. And obviously, so many of their pals did as well. So I remember, I guess when Anthony was a sophomore, he came over from Chauncey Rose Middle School. And I remember hearing my brother's friends out playing basketball, and I usually hung around them. One was saying something like, it's like, yeah, do you see that Thompson kid from Chauncey Rose? It's like, yeah. I said, yeah, I don't think any of us are touching the ball for the rest of our time. Unless it's a fumble recovery or a downed punt. Because I can tell you, just watching those games at North, there was no greater sports comedy for me as a kid than watching like just normal high school kids, like Sullivan from Northview, from West Vigo, trying to tackle Anthony Thompson in the open field.
It was a different era because it really, we when we were, and again, and I didn't really. I played for two guys who were younger, and one of them, my first football coach was actually, believe it or not, and he actually admits this. I don't know why he would admit it. If you know the name Coach Eric Moore out of Center Grove, he spent a season in Columbus coaching at Central Middle School, which was my 7th grade football team.
Yeah.
And I think I learned more about how to motivate players. As I look back, the wisdom that he imparted when I was 12 has kind of stuck with me over the years. And we've had a chance to, we talk, I'll run into him upon occasion and we'll just, chat a little bit. And it's always good to get to know him. His son Tyson's doing a bang up job down in Seymour, which is, again, another program that has a great deal of history, but has had a rough 20 or so years, since Joe Goodman left there. But, I was lucky to have him. Jay Leahy was my 8th grade football coach, and then Don Schmidt in 9th grade. And, and all three of them, I think, they all kind of knew at that level that throwing the football was a bad idea. And you notice that during that time, even going through the 80s, and we practiced it. They wanted to do it, I think. They wanted to make sure we could eventually do it. But when you start looking at games today, you look at kids today, even at younger levels, they're putting the ball in the air a lot more.
Oh, yeah.
They're spreading the offense out a lot more. You're seeing more split ends, flank, or slots, basically wideouts and slots. You're seeing a lot more, just different formations to spread a defense out. More, less under center, more shotgun snap. Whereas, we had 4 plays that we ran probably 90% of the time. It was 41-42 dive and 47 or 48-49 sweep. It was basically you ran those, and occasionally to mix it up, you gave it to this kid that plays fullback, and you hoped he didn't fumble. Mm-hmm. But most times your tailback was probably getting 40 carries a game, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I think. It's kind of interesting as I've seen that too, like, looking at high school games now, like, especially in Pennsylvania. I mean, I'm kind of in the breadbasket of, quarterbacks and all that. But, you talk to locals even now that watched the game back then, they said, oh yeah, we used to run the ball all the time. Now we're just, passing it all over the place. And I think that's one reason I actually have my appreciation for the sport has actually grown, because frankly, I was, as much as fun as it was to watch Anthony Thompson humiliate, those kids, I think that sort of Woody Hayes version of football, that 3 yards and a cloud of dust,
right?
Football just kind of bored me after a while. I mean, it seemed like every sequence was like the same thing: off tackle left, off tackle right, throw on 3rd down, punt. And just if you're lucky enough maybe to complete that 3rd down, you keep going and just do the cycle over again.
Right.
So I used to think that football was just overly scripted and predictable. It's just it's almost like sumo wrestling. Whoever had the biggest, guys on the front 5 would probably win. There'd be Michigan, Ohio State, Nebraska, and all that. So my turnabout on football started I guess it was around 1990. And I remember specifically around it was 1990 season towards the end. I remember watching the high school game that weekend. Same thing: off tackle left, off tackle right, throw, punt. Mm-hmm. I watched the first 2 games of the Saturday college football segment. I watched the noon game and the 3:30 game, both Big Ten games. Again, both run fest. Mm-hmm. At the night game, I watched a Florida State game, and I was just absolutely captivated. They had 400 yards or something of passing, multiple trick plays, even the plays that weren't tricks, they were all deception plays, getting the defense to go this way, throw back the other direction. It was just completely different than what I was used to. And so then I really got interested, watching coaches like Bowden, Bobby Bowden and Howard Schellenberger, all those teams that were actually starting to gear up for, the passing game. And I think what really sealed it the next year, I watched it. FSU went into Michigan. It was like after Michigan had just beat Notre Dame. It was the Desmond Howard Heisman year, and all like my friends were like, "Oh man, the big FSU Michigan game," and they all thought like Michigan was going to pulverize FSU. Mm-hmm. It was the opposite. FSU was running circles around Michigan. They put up 51 points on them, and this is like top 3 or 4 Michigan team. So ever since then, I was like, oh man, this is the kind of football I actually enjoy. So you can go on YouTube, you can look at 1991 FSU Michigan and just watch the highlights. It was almost comical. I know. I think that game tape is somewhere on like every Ohio State fan's like Schadenfreude library somewhere.
Well, and again, going looking even at I'll just reference Coach Moore again. I remember our 7th grade playbook. I still actually held on to it for some strange reason because it was impressive to me how it was about yay thick.
Yeah.
And he taught me how to like charting plays, for example. And so then he would just we were running basic analytics, but we ran a lot of different, we had several different pass patterns. Coach Leahy and Coach Schmidt also did the same thing. But you really had to run what you could block. And that was part of the problem also was that, the difference between pass blocking and run blocking. And just when you have guys that are just beginning in the game at 13, 14, 15 years of age, there's a lot of intricacies in pass cover, blocking versus, and how you're blocking those things versus just going down and hitting the crap out of somebody.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of it also, I remember Coach Schmidt, used the Big Ten adage, which was, well, you know what? You throw the football, there's 4 things that happen and 3 of them are bad. Yeah. and I
think it's a Woody Hayes quote, right?
Yeah, it totally was. And he growled. He was like, Motzi, I'm going to tell you, I want to throw the thing, but I never have a guy that can throw it.
Yeah.
When I have a guy that can catch it, I never have a guy who can catch it when I have somebody who can throw it. So I just run it. And he was one of the greatest, one of the greatest guys I knew. Just incredibly dedicated, in the weight room. Again, he taught me weight room. Coach Leahy taught me, schematics and scout teams, how to really do scout teams. Coach Moore taught me, overall season preparation and perseverance and really just finding whatever you can find to motivate kids to run through a brick wall.
Yeah.
All of them teach you something. But at the end of the day, the game was definitely, and again, in all 3 of their cases, and especially with Coach Leahy and Coach Moore, they both figured out as the game was progressing that they had to stay up on what the changes were. Coach Moore goes to Florida, does really well down there, then returns to Center Grove. He threw the ball a bunch in Florida. Yeah. Came back to Center Grove, and he's been running it because he knows he can block, using a wing T offense. But that's my background is kind of watching evolution and watching these guys do those things.
Yeah. That's interesting you mentioned that because if he's like throwing down Florida, I think that's a lot of the variance of the systems is based upon the players that are available to you. Because you think about like in the state of Indiana, like think like the best like offensive high school players the last 30, 40 years. A lot of them are running backs. It was like Anthony Thompson, Lars Tate, a lot of those type of dudes.
Brett Law.
Brett Law, yeah.
I mean,
but you didn't have. There were a few good quarterbacks, obviously, a few, but some of them, Earl Hannaford didn't work out so much.
But Rick Meyer was a really good college quarterback.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But there weren't a lot of wide receivers.
No.
I don't remember like in the state of Indiana has just not produced like wide receivers the way like Florida and Georgia does. I mean, every year Florida is just pumping out like multiple NFL receivers every single year from their high school ranks. For the state of Indiana, they might produce one every half decade or so.
It's a state full of Charlie Millers. It's a state literally chock full. The ones that can shoot jump shots end up playing basketball. The rest of them are jumping in the end zone because they can outleap, because they just have that length, that jumping ability, and they play the sport.
Yeah, and that's why my critique. I mean, I guess when I say that, my preference for that version of football, it's not so much that it's like a criticism of like the choices that coaches made in the Midwest. It's just practical reasons, they had to like run, like more power I or option versus like throwing the ball like 40 times a game.
Right. And again, it's like, passing to tight ends. I mean, it's like if you can get 5 yards with an out pattern, or you can get 5 yards with the run, the run is just a much more reliable way to get the ball from point A to point B.
Yeah.
That being said, though, as we, progressed, we got out of our hometowns, we ended up in Bloomington at the end of the Bill Mallory era. And that was always, I mean, I think people don't fully recognize how just where IU football was before Bill Mallory and after, if that makes sense. Because I remember Lee Corso barely. I remember the 1 year of Sam Weish, and then I remember Mallory comes to town and they don't win a Big Ten game for 2 years.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden he puts them in a bowl game.
Yeah. Yeah, that was like my first like real college game. I went to see IU play Navy, and Napoleon McCallum was playing. I think it was like 85 season.
Okay.
That was like my first like, dad took me to like I remember specifically.
Oh wow.
Because I remember all around town they had like, go IU sink Navy, which I always thought that poster was a little odd. It's like, my God, that sounds like, we're in Imperial Japan. Like, we're cheering for the Navy to get sunk.
Oh, jeez.
But
we're the Spanish fleet in Manila Bay.
Like, was an odd thing to cheer for, but no, it was. I remember like how down things were then, because they still. I remember there were cups that still had like the 1979 Holiday Bowl. That was like the last bit of memorabilia IU fans could kind of grasp onto. It's like we had that 1 year there, but yeah, I think Mallory had that like awful like first year, but you can kind of tell like things were starting to like improve even incrementally. People kind of sense like, okay, well, this guy seems a little bit different than the others.
And I think it was also, you look at the margins from that era, and it wasn't. They were competitive, and you could also tell you had a weird situation. Lee Corso is booted basically out of Bloomington. They bring Sam Weish in for a year, who spends 1 year at IU and then gets hired by the Cincinnati Bengals to be their head coach to replace, I believe it was Forrest Gregg, Packer fame. And then they bring Bill Mallory, and I believe, was it Northern Illinois, or was it was a MAC school, right?
We went to Colorado, then Northern
Colorado.
Illinois.
Right. So he had been in several different locations, and that was right before Colorado had a couple really good years where they were national contenders. Yeah, the McCartney era.
Yeah.
But he came in. Mallory always tells was probably, he was actually, I think, if you were looking for the right type of coach at that time, he was it. And then they came within one game of making a Rose Bowl in '87. They were competitive throughout the decade.
Yeah.
And then once John Cooper got hired at Michigan, once it was Moeller got hired, Gary Moeller got hired Cooper at Ohio State, Moeller at Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
Once Penn State got into the conference,
and Alvarez got in Wisconsin going.
That's right. The Alvarez hire in Wisconsin, Neuheisel up at Northwestern. I mean, there was kind of this coaching carousel switching that happened in the early '90s, where some programs kind of got it together. And there was a limited talent pool, and things just went kind of south while we were there, and we sat in Memorial Stadium and kind of watched the fall. If I recall correctly.
Yeah, exactly. And Chiller showing up at Purdue, like with the bubble screen offense, should change a lot of things up too.
And that when IU fired Mallory and Purdue fired Coletto, that was my first. That was 96, 97.
Yeah.
And I remember you and I talking a lot during that time of what IU needed. And there was a lot of excitement. Don't get me wrong. There was a lot of excitement for Cam Cameron.
Yeah.
Because we thought, okay, he might, if Bill built a solid foundation, if Cameron can just figure out how to bring in the right guys.
Yeah.
and get them to play together and really just and really jazz up the offense. I remember us watching IU and Ball State, and you and I and a bunch of our buddies, we were doing the tomahawk chop when he ran. I think he was using Jay Rogers. He ran the Florida State throwback play.
Yeah, he did. He did the quarterback over, quarterback back, and then, get behind the offensive line. So, yeah.
I mean, it's like, wait a minute, did we just do that in Memorial Stadium? And
Yeah.
and then the next week was the Kentucky game where we had to burn the black uniforms.
I still wear, the black,
we know
that works for me, versus the red stuff.
So yeah, and so over those, so basically we're fans of the sport. I think we both have, we kind of did the whole, I always like to watch Ohio State, like to watch Notre Dame. I'll watch SEC football a lot just as an appreciation for the virtuosity of the virtuosity of the players and the coaching. And we do watch a lot of IU football too.
Yeah, and we've had some interesting live, let's say, visits for IU games, right? We were in the parking lot for the Phillip Rivers game, where we were at the game for 57 minutes of game time.
We were there for 57 minutes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we're walking out as Phillip Rivers it was his first college game.
College game in Bloomington. And somehow, why were we leaving? I can't remember why
we had to get somewhere. I think
we had to somewhere. Okay,
Greenberg or one of us, I think, had to go do something, and we were like walking out with IU winning, and then Phillip Rivers pulls off a miraculous 80-yard drive with basically a minute left and won the game.
Phillip Rivers and Antoine Randall going up against each other as quarterbacks. Pretty amazing happening in the late 90s.
Yeah.
It's around the same time, though. You mentioned John. We have to just mention this fact that
the West Lafayette visit.
Yeah, when we did the bucket game in 90, it was the 98 bucket game where we were standing in the middle of the Purdue Fan Central, and we probably needed a police escort to get out of the place.
Yeah, well, the way I remember that this little conflagration is we were right next to the Purdue band. We're just they're just to the right of us, and people in front of us were standing. Mm-hmm. And people behind us were sitting, and we were literally right on the border. So we were just staring in the back of these Purdue students. And so I guess we kind of stood up, and then some old timer Purdue guys just literally were tell us to sit down. So I was like, okay, well, how do we like manage this? Do we just say ordering, these Purdue kids, to sit down because, the IU people like us can't see or. So yeah. I think one of them put their hands on Jonathan, and that
big mistake.
Yeah, it was a mistake, but we did survive, and everything, turned out okay.
We all played with pencils on the benches, spinning them on the wooden pencils on the benches, and became fast friends quickly with the student section. Exactly. It's them. I swear to God, it's them. Yeah. So anyway, so as we kind of talk about, enough about us on that. As we come, when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about this football season, and in particular, what we're kind of seeing is interesting across the board with couple different programs, as well as just some trends inside the game when we get back to X's and Joe's.
Welcome back to X's and Joe's. I'm Mike Weemuth, joined by Coach Bob Moats. So Bob, I've already said that how much I love this time of year, and I know you get excited about this too. I'm curious, what in watching the games, what games have you watched? Are there teams that you kind of noticed or follow in the first 3 weeks that catch your eye, or just from an entertainment standpoint, what have you been watching as the game has started?
I mean, I've been watching it. It was interesting. I watched a pretty good portion of Michigan and Texas.
Yeah.
And watching Texas right now is really interesting as they make the jump from the Big 12 to the SEC. And really watching and kind of following Michigan a little bit this year of, are they going through a regression? What does life look like in Ann Arbor the year after Jim Harbaugh leaves,
Yeah.
the year after the manifesto in particular.
I'm still pissed that that's not out there.
We got it. I mean, it's like the Pentagon Papers, isn't it? It's got to be. We got to find that damn thing. It's like it is.
Yeah, but people that know me know how much of I won't say an addict, but I really need to see the Connor Stallions manifesto. Not for its football value, but for its comedic value, because I know that it sounds like something right out of a Christopher Guest movie. It's like Best in Show, like you just see like a character like that. Yes, I have a 700-page manifesto about me leading Michigan football to glory in the next 3 decades. You just know that someone actually wrote that. What's contained in those pages has to be absolute
comedic gold. Comedic gold. What is a Michigan man? It's like, oh no, here it comes. It's like that could be a Monty Python song.
In that Netflix doc about Connor Stallions, they show briefly on his screen just some parts of the manifesto, and so it's there. So I want to send the guy an email, say, look, just I'll pay a small fee if you just let me, I'll pay by the page if you just let me see this.
We'll take a collection. At that point.
The Back Home Network.
The Back Home Network go fund me for the Connor Stallions.
Purchases the manifesto.
We want it. We won't publish it. We'll just reference it.
Yeah, or we'll bring him on the show and have him, talk about it.
Oh, that was an idea.
For the IU Michigan game.
We have Connor Stallions here. Yeah. But Michigan is fascinating to me right now because it is kind of this sort of welcome to the new era for college sports, where Harbaugh comes off of, I would call it almost an improbable national championship. When you think about Georgia, when you think about Ohio State, when you think about Alabama, all three in particular, and you think about just the uphill climb that a Big Ten program has to undergo to get to the playoff, and then, get through the playoff.
Yeah.
Harbaugh, and let's face it, Jim Harbaugh 3 years ago was on a hot seat.
Oh yeah. After that, after the 7th or 8th, consecutive loss to
Ohio State. I mean,
Michigan State, he had a bad streak with them too.
And I think he was sub 500. I think.
He had a really bad year in there, somewhere.
So I mean, he's fairly improbable in the fact that he brought it back the way, as quickly as he did, actually bringing it back at all.
Yeah.
After a regression that turned into an absolute just going south for the winter, just a nosedive. He pulled it out.
Yeah.
But watching how there's a struggle. It seems like it's going on in Ann Arbor right now. That's there.
Yeah.
I'm always intrigued by Notre Dame. Losing to Northern Illinois was something that almost for them had to just be. There are so many weird parallels between Notre Dame football and Indiana University basketball, in like the last national championship, sort of things, and history, as we talked about. But watching them, and going through losing to a MAC school and then turning around the next, this past week and just roasting Purdue.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's the most points Purdue's ever given up, right? I think I saw that somewhere.
Yeah, I think it's the worst loss at Ross-Ade Stadium, I believe, or something like that. I know it was a record-breaking day, unfortunately, for Purdue. So
it wasn't good, and it kind of reminds you back to when we were growing up, when Lou Holtz was at Notre Dame, and they had the coach du jour, whether it was Fred Akers or Jim Coletto or somebody.
Yeah.
Notre Dame would schedule Purdue on the thing just to prepare for Michigan State. That was kind of the thing back at that era. But just the fact that they're running the ball so much and so well is an interesting thing for me, watching Notre Dame kind of go systemically where they are.
Yeah.
And just kind of wondering in the back of my head, in the new era where we have potentially Power 2,
Yeah.
And you
SEC,
have
Big Ten, yeah.
you have the Atlantic Coast Conference and the Big 12 that are still viable in that area. So you may have the next two. And you have Notre Dame, which technically is an ACC school, but they still haven't fully submitted their football program and put their football program into ACC competition. How they're going to work as like who's going to really want to play them over the course of the next 5 years out of the SEC or the Big Ten?
Yeah,
when they could do so much, maybe they do better playing, beating up on each other a little bit, or does Purdue get stuck playing the lower tiers of those conferences because
it's interesting because I know Notre Dame always used to hold out, that's always been for decades. Will Notre Dame join the Big Ten or some other conference? I know because the TV contract, that was always something that they always kind of hold up. It's like, well, if we join a conference, what's going to happen to that? Because these other conferences are now getting their own TV contracts. And, can you have two going on at the same time, or would we be forced to sacrifice or revenue share? And I think just as a matter of pride, I think Notre Dame has just always liked being independent. They feel like, I think people in Notre Dame think of themselves as being unique and special. And the moment you submit to a conference, you're no longer unique and special. You're just like everyone else. You're one of 10 or 20 in a one singular unit of a conference.
But wouldn't you argue Penn State, when they did it 30 years ago, and it's been 30 years since Penn State joined the Big Ten, 31 years actually.
Yeah.
It's helped them.
Yeah, I would say, Penn State's kind of unusual just because geographically where they are, they're kind of like the power school that can kind of access New Jersey, New York, talent and all that. But I think overall, it's kind of linked them more into being able to get kids in Ohio and Michigan easier because now they have to play in those places. And so I think the exposure is just a little bit better for them. So I think, Florida State, we're talking about them earlier, in the 90s, late 80s, they were still basically independent. They were technically in the Metro Conference for a while. They were in the same conference as Louisville and some of those guys. And then they joined the ACC. And then for the first 6 or 7 years, they basically didn't lose any games in the ACC. They dominated. And then they kind of it helped them because they could actually get a little bit more stability in their schedule. And then it helped raise the bar on the ACC. That's why you saw a lot of those ACC schools start to spend more money. It's we can't just let this one school just, run away with it every year. And finally, other ACC schools kind of caught up with them. So I think overall, just joining a conference has so many benefits compared to just staying independent. And I think you're right. It's going to be a little bit harder, I think, with the power that these consolidated conference are going to have, that you're going to feel almost like a tug to you have to join. It's no longer an option for you.
Well, because at the same time, if you're the ACC and you're looking at this from a standpoint of football's going to be our moneymaker. That's what brings the money in. If Notre Dame is holding out, they're devaluing the overall conference.
Right.
And so at what point do you tighten the screws down and say, for this to work, you're going to have to be a part of this? Or again, then there's the predictions of who jumps out of the ACC into the SEC, those sorts of questions. Does it behoove Clemson and Florida State to make that move? Does it behoove North Carolina to make that move?
Yeah.
But that's a big. That's more the business side of it. It's more interesting. It's also interesting though from the competitive side of it for Notre Dame, which is they kind of came into this season ready to kind of be a playoff contender.
Mm-hmm.
And after the Northern Illinois loss, can they find a way to rebound themselves and put them back into the conversation?
Yeah. Well, do you think, and this is something I noticed, maybe this is my big observation the first 3 weeks of the season. Do you think that these schools that are really kind of getting hammered by these either unexpected losses or just a string of losses that maybe they weren't anticipating, a lot of it seems to be because they couldn't get their quarterback situation ironed out.
Right.
You look at Michigan, Florida, Auburn, FSU. Those teams are pretty much cooked for this season. owing to having like really crappy quarterback options available to them. They look on the flip side, like, Miami, they weren't world beaters last year. And then they go get Cam Ward from Washington State.
Right.
And he's a Heisman front runner. I mean, he possibly might win the thing. And he's like just single-handedly pulled the Hurricanes up to possibly being, one of the top like 5 teams in the country. And so you see these, like, it's what we were talking about volatility earlier. I think the portal creates these kind of unique situations where you're getting your starters fresh from outside. You have no experience with them at all. And the people like doing the preseason rankings have no experience, like, rating this guy on your team. It's not like they've watched that kid come up as like, a sophomore and junior, and now he's finally ready and he's going to take the helm, and everyone kind of knows, maybe through just mop-up duty at the school about what the kid can do. But you look again, like watching some of these teams, they bring in the quarterback from the outside. Mm-hmm. They have very little time to sort of like do the normal preparation for them. The kid arrives in like July and he's starting like, a few weeks later. And some of these teams are just getting absolutely like waylaid by the fact that their quarterbacks are just not working. And some of them to the point of like being dysfunctional. I mean, like FSU, if you watch those FSU games, I mean, the poor kid that they brought in, from Clemson. He was like a 5-star recruit.
Right.
But he's like one of the biggest, like, unfortunate, like, washouts as a 5-star. And they brought him in thinking, okay, well, we can rehab him. We can get him, up to speed. And unfortunately, he's cannot just do some basic functional things. And it's like tough for both the coaches and the kid, because maybe the kid just doesn't belong at FSU, and the coaches at FSU think, okay, well, this kid doesn't fit here. Now what do? We've put all of our eggs in this one basket. Probably had to give him a very substantial NIL deal.
Right.
And tried to make promises to him to say, yeah, look, when you come in here, you will be the starter. There's no competition for you coming here. This will be the arrangement. And I think some of these high brand schools, like the ones I mentioned before, are just like getting kind of caught because, they have no choice in going into the portal, taking like a starter, and they're just having to like, ride that starter up or down, up the mountain or basically down into the ravine.
Well, is there a more essential position in any team, and I'm going to say any team sport, than that of quarterback in football?
Systematically, probably not.
No, and I actually think from a complexity, when you think about you need unicorns to be quarterbacks.
Right.
They're really the amount, and we're not just talking physical attributes and gifts. You're talking about a brain that has to be able to, the amount of reads they have to make, the amount of study that goes into that position.
Yeah.
And I can tell you 2 things about some 5-star quarterbacks. I can tell you a few things about how some 5-star quarterbacks don't always go the way that you think they're going to go.
Right.
Or some 4-star quarterbacks that don't always go the way you think they're going to go. Mm-hmm. They got the arm. They've got the pedigree. They have the physical gifts. They got the height. They got everything. But they're missing another element to this, which is their ability to come into a locker room, and maybe getting a 5th-year senior from a MAC school who's shown themselves to be able to hit marks on their passes and be able to make run a system effectively is a better investment than a sophomore that, had a rough redshirt year, a rough freshman year, and then is coming in and we're trying to rehab.
Yeah.
Would you rather have somebody that, and especially in the college, like the NFL is a much different boat also. I mean, there's 25 guys in the world who could be an effective NFL starting quarterback.
Yeah, effective, exactly.
I think 20 and that number and the people who are in that 25 changes potentially every week. That you may get a guy that's effective for a little while, or a guy that was effective for 5 years that all of a sudden, just someone's figured it out. There's enough tape on, there's enough film on them.
They ding their knee and they can't quite push off like they used to.
Right. Or they're not as mobile as they used to be, or the concussions have caught up to them. All of those factors, all of those things lead into, you have a guy that isn't there. So from a quarterback standpoint, in the college game especially, being able to kind of build a playbook around. I was having a conversation with somebody earlier today about this, which is like, well, who your quarterback is, as well as who your line can block, kind of sets your identity.
Yeah.
Your skill positions definitely do matter, but like you can have the 5 fastest wide receivers in, split out in the slots. And if you can't get a guy that can hit it on a dime 40 yards down the field, it doesn't matter it doesn't matter.
Yeah. You run all of that stuff and then,
yeah,
you can't do that can't do that essential function of quarterbacks is putting the ball in the right spot at the right time.
If you've got a quarterback that really doesn't know how to, make the audible and the adjustment for your run game, you're going to get your running back killed. You're not going to run anybody 40 times a game anymore.
Yeah.
I think it would probably be felonious in 42 states to run a running back 40 times a game.
Yeah, exactly. Especially now when those some of the best like running backs, you get like 4 good years out of them because the beating those guys take anymore in the NFL is just so horrendous.
Yeah, I mean,
like college, it's like it's got the same thing. It's like, yeah, I need to save these knees for the big payday in the NFL.
Right. I'm going to have, I have a very limited, and they're commodities now. I mean, running backs are basically commodities. Was there a running back taken in the first round last year? First 3 rounds?
I think there was, but I don't know. I have to remember. But yeah, it was not. It's not what it used to be. Yeah.
No. That was the position. Everybody wanted to be a tailback. Those were Walter Payton and Jim Brown were, and we want to be in the backfield. I mean, anymore, you may just have one guy. You basically have one running back also, and you have everybody else are some sort of receiver / blocker type receiver position.
Yeah.
So you also need to have a quarterback, I think, in the collegiate game that's mobile. I think that's very hard to run an effective college offense with just a single option quarterback.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you have to run the ball. The guy doesn't run the ball 15 times a game, but he at least has to pull a defensive player off to be a spy.
Yeah. Or he has to be able to run outside of the defensive ends and put pressure on the corners, at least make them make decisions. I think you can do, it's one of those things that, you can be, it's possible to do it if you're immobile, but it just means that your skill set at passing and doing all the other things has to be elevated to make up the gap.
You have to be elite. You have to be an elite passer, elite at making an elite decision maker in the passing game. And you better have guys out there that can catch your pass. That's the other thing, is that you can throw the damn thing, but if the guy, if they actually can't catch that ball, like John Elway used to have that problem. It's like, can his receivers catch the pass?
Yeah. The 100-mile-an-hour fastball from 3 feet away.
Yeah. I mean, breaking their wrists as the ball's hitting him in the hands.
Yeah.
It's so I think that there's that you bring up a great point, that the teams that are having problems are clearly having problems at the quarterback position. Yeah. I think it's also a thing now with defensively. Yeah. And I think on the defensive side of the ball, running into that situation of, well, can they get are these teams getting penetration? Are they getting pass rush? They get penetration there. Are they able to get, if they get penetration, are they also then are they able to get coverage sacks? Are they able to get those coverage sacks? Can they cover both? Can they cover basically multiple things with the defensive personnel that they have?
Yeah.
And you're seeing a lot of teams out there where I see a lot of times defense is still, I mean, we're seeing a lot of really good. I think we're seeing a lot of good defensive football right now, to be perfectly honest. I think we're seeing a lot of teams that are really doing a good job of disrupting. And it's going to be interesting to see in the next 6 weeks, because as we know with football, offense takes a little bit of time to get the chemistry right.
Right. From
play calling to personnel. I think it really starts personnel to play calling to then the decisions made inside and what type of structures you have inside, like run pass RPO, or the speed options that teams run a lot. That sort of getting outside, and then getting your line, your cover, your line blocking, your line schemes to work, your blocking schemes to go along with the play calling and everything else. They're still trying to figure some things out, and teams look a lot different in November than they look in September oftentimes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we've.
Who are you looking at, by the way? What? Give me a couple schools that you're kind of very interested in right now.
Let's see. I'm besides the obvious ones, maybe we've kind of talked about already. Oregon kind of interested me with their high level quarterback that they brought in, and also just again having joined the Big Ten. I'm kind of curious how they're going to run just as a program itself. I mean, Oregon's kind of always interesting to me because they've got that money and they kind of have like an interesting scheme, and
they do.
So them and USC I think kind of interests me. I kind of knew that UCLA was maybe not having a great year, and obviously this last weekend they kind of prove, at least they seem to prove that maybe they're not going to be great.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's one of the interesting things that I always like doing, and like at the beginning of a season, is just try to track to see like, well, who's really playing above their, let's say, their expected level, let's say. And so I was like, I mean, literally sometimes you can do like, sort of like the gambler's view. It's like, okay, well, who's beating their lines by the most? If they're they're expected to win by like 30 and they beat someone by 50, okay, well those are the ones
something. That's something. Yeah.
Yeah. You see kind of like the disappointing ones. I mean, I think I'm almost more interested in the disappointment, the ones that have kind of like everyone expected them to be like, at a certain level and they're kind of down. And I think I've probably noticed more of those. And again, it's the ones we talked about, like, Florida, FSU, Auburn. There's not been a ton that just like jump out and say, oh my God, they're really amazing. I mean, even Georgia. I mean, like Georgia, they kind of got lucky against Kentucky. They won by 1 in Lexington. I was really curious to see how their offense is going to be this year, and it really kind of has the vibe of like, okay, it's going to be maybe the defense has to like really carry them throughout the year. At least so far. I mean, maybe they kind of get going again, but I mean, we're talking about defenses. Those Georgia teams, like watching those guys, especially like some of in the last like 2 years.
Yeah.
If I just blur my eyes just enough and just watch the outlines of those guys like on the TV screen, it looks like an NFL team. The closing speed that their safeties and linebackers have is unbelievable. And then of course you see like, every draft, it's like their whole defensive, like, front line and their, their front seven just gets first like 3 rounds. So yeah, I mean, it is interesting. Like Georgia, I think they're just as a unit, their defensive unit is just like so insanely talented. They're the one unit that just kind of stands out. Like, okay, those guys can't be touched. It's just do they have enough offensive like productivity to like, go, maybe they face a team like Texas that actually has, some good offensive talent. Can they like score just enough to be able to like, overcome the offensive advantage that some of these other teams have?
And that's I think, Georgia, the last, this year, and you may call it a regression potentially based on what they've had. It's plausible that we could be talking about that. And by a regression at Georgia looks like a really good year for everybody else in the country.
Yeah, exactly.
Like when Alabama's down, it's like, okay, yeah, we'll all take that in a heartbeat. You're still making the playoffs.
Yeah,
but no, that's an interesting point. That can't, when you think about that type of talent and I would throw Alabama and Georgia in the kind of the same boat on this.
Right.
It's almost like a survive. It's like a pit. It's like a survivor. It's like a gladiator pit.
Yeah.
And so you take 50 of the best, or 20 of the best, 20 of the best in the country, and you throw them in a pit together, and the 11 that's your starting defense.
Yeah.
And I think that there's always been kind of and that's I think the question as we look at the sport progressing. How much longer is this going to be, or what happens to those 9 castoffs? They don't just sit there and they're not the guy in Rudy at the end who gets his 1 carry.
Yeah.
They're not going to be stuck there forever, and so programs are going to be able to at least poach those guys, and maybe after a year or two, they've built their body up to a point where they may not be Georgia quality middle linebacker, but you drop them in at South Carolina, they're going to look damn good.
Yeah, exactly. I think you're right. That's a good point. I think some of those, let's say, second tier SEC schools might benefit because a lot of like Georgia, Bama, and when Florida was like good a few years ago, they would typically poach the best kids from the neighboring states.
Right.
So they would go into Louisiana, take the best Louisiana kids. They go to the Carolinas and take them. And so I think if those kids go to Georgia, they can't get playing time. They can pop back to their original state school that's in the SEC and make a name for themselves. You see that's happened to a few times with some players. So I think you're right. I think the portal gives at least that opportunity for not total parity, but just incremental movement towards some parity within the conference.
Yeah.
What do you think about the refereeing so far this year?
Yeah, I think I've always thought that officials, it's hard. It's hard. I would never want to be an official in any sport. Honestly,
Yeah.
I am not wired to be an official.
Yeah. Some of our friends are, and I'm impressed by their.
Sam Story is doing the Lord's work, and I don't have that wiring. I find it interesting because of the changes in the game right now, the sport, and CTE is it an epidemic level in football? I think you're dealing when you start talking about the amount of the physics of football, speed plus force, the amount of impact. You have to make some sort of adjustments. It's not that people are soft. It's not that they don't do like they used to be.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is, even guys like Art Donovan were liquefactioning their brains in the 50s.
Yeah.
And now you're putting it's almost like you're asking two guys, you're asking two guys who are flying F-35s to just crash into each other.
Yeah. Yeah, the speed of the players changes the physics of it, right?
And you're still getting guys that are just basically just blasting the crap, because they're blasting each other so hard. You're gonna and so you're an official and you're having to look at this in real time and make a split-second decision. The fact they get as much right as they do is pretty remarkable.
Yeah,
but they're humans.
Yeah,
and I think that for an entire fraternity, and I think I know your loading of your question, my friend, because it was kind of funny today watching something happen on Twitter.
Yeah,
on the word passing posture. Look, who was the first base umpire in '85 who got the call wrong?
Oh yeah, the Cardinals game. Yeah,
that guy fessed up.
Yeah,
he fessed up and even said we need replay. But an entire fraternity of officials should not, and their chief mouthpiece on NBC shouldn't be sitting there trying to flex because they found a term in a rule book that has nothing to do with the fact that how the hell are you supposed to, as a guy that was it was a tackle. It was a clean tackle. He didn't drive him to the ground. It wasn't like a 300-pound lineman knocking the hell out of a 185-pound running back and pile driving him, or doing what Charles Haley did to Jim McMahon. A million years. No, not Charles. Who are the guy at the Packers? But when Jim McMahon got tossed to the ground and they separated his
ear, one of those guys.
I mean, it's not like it's that egregious to the point where it was a tackle. It was a clean play.
Yeah. Just for the fans, we're referencing the Indiana UCLA football game where a controversial tackle took place. Well, I won't say it's technically controversial. It was a clean tackle. It was a violent clean tackle where the Indiana, I guess the Indiana blitzing defender came in, walloped the UCLA quarterback, and was called for
roughing the passer. It was roughing the passer.
Yeah, and so the funny thing is, it was funny. The
throw the damn ball.
The reference to a passing posture was mentioned by Terry McCauley, who is the NBC. I guess he's the referee consultant for the game. Yeah. It was funny because it sounded like the announcers were saying, well, that was just a sack. And then of course, whenever there's a controversial call, they have to bring in, these, the referee guys. Like, So Terry, tell us about what your thoughts are. And it does feel like when they're brought in, it's almost like they're the union rep that's coming in to like defend the employee that just, like got drunk, drove the forklift into the $50 million worth of, product and
he's a
destroyed
functional alcoholic.
I don't know what the problem is here.
Functional alcoholic. He needs his 6 beers to stop shaking.
Exactly. It's like, well, I don't see what the problem is here. So yeah, the best he could come up with was like, well, he was in a passing posture, which technically is that is something that does appear in the rule books. Passing, like for casual fans, if you look at the rule books, like nerds like we do, there is such a thing as like a ball carrier and a passer. And the rules make very specific distinctions between what you can do with those two people. A ball carrier in the rules, you can pretty much blast pretty easily, as long as they're not doing it like with the point of the helmet and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, none of that.
Exactly.
Thank God.
A quarterback has special protections. And so when you're in the passing posture, that basically means that the rules of protecting the quarterback apply. It does not mean, as was seen to imply in the game, that you can't do anything to a quarterback once they're in the passing posture. I mean, that would be a great thing, if you're a quarterback and that was the rule. You could just like carry a sign that says passing posture, just do this and run wherever you want to without getting tackled. But yeah, I mean, basically, if you're in a passing posture, you can't, the rules are basically, you can't tackle them at below the knees. You can't hit them in, like above the shoulders. You can't drive them into the ground. You can't launch at them, all that kind of stuff. So that was like, I was hoping like someone would just like ask, the referee consultant in follow-up is like, well, which one of the 5 stipulations were true on that particular play? Like what was the violation there? So yeah, but I think it's hilarious. I think like passing posture needs to become like a meme. It's like any time like in life where you want some kind of like some exception to any sort of physical harm, no matter what you do, you just say like, well, no, I'm in a passing posture. You can't do it. So I think that needs to, happen.
That's going to get me out of, that gets you out of a bar fight, kids.
Exactly.
Just say I'm in a passing posture. After I hit on your girlfriend, I'm in a passing posture. You can't hit me with the beer bottle.
Gotta go.
See, I'm going to pass it. Okay. Well, yeah, and again, I think, and this is again a problem across the board when you start watching any sort of sports. You get 15 minutes or 5 minutes of dead air.
Yeah.
As they're under some apron looking at the play.
Yeah.
From 17 different angles. Now, look, I'm glad we have it. Instant replay.
Yeah.
Helps you get the calls right. But now you have to fill dead air.
Yeah.
And so, you're going to call this guy, you're calling, Terry, what was it? Terry McCauley. Terry McCauley. You're going to call him in and have him explain, the rule or what have you. And oftentimes it's actually good. But the problem is sometimes when the guy on the field blows it, just somebody say the guy on the field blew it.
Yeah. Yeah. Just say like, I think he was thinking this, but you just misinterpreted or, just missaw it. So,
and I'm sure that in the officials meeting after the game's over, they're going to have the conversation. It's going to be okay. And did it impact that game? No.
Yeah, it was not a critical event. It was just more like it just pissed people off at the moment.
Targeting is really hard because you have guys who are basically running at insane levels of speed running into each other.
Yeah.
And so now again, I think a lot of it comes down to, you talk about the high school game and younger. You're also talking in the college game, teaching proper technique, teaching proper, respect for the, for yourself and for your opponent.
Yeah.
Not compressing your spine every time you're knocking the crap out of somebody.
Yeah.
If you're running at a 4.5 40 and you're running into them, that's not what we're talking about. But, and again, respecting the fact that it's hard to officiate at any level.
Yeah. Well, you also from the perspective of the referees, I know that referees, especially like at all levels, especially like, college, they're getting waylaid by the messages about CTE and CTE avoidance. And it's not just like a an issue for the game. It's literally like, I think the lawyers are getting involved and saying like, we need to be able to show possibly in future potential litigation, we did absolutely everything we could do to mitigate, the chances or at least the instances of traumatic brain injury during, these games. So if you're a referee, it's like you're getting told that, stop this stuff, make sure that, these guys are protected. So, yeah, I mean, and I think one of the unspoken rules that I see in a lot of like football the last 2 or 3 years is that there are hits that are legal but violent.
Right.
And I think a lot of those are getting called. And I think the one that happened in the IU UCLA game is like a perfect example of that. It was absolutely by the book legal. Right. But from like a violent standpoint, I mean, the kid really nailed the UCLA quarterback and he just rocked him back. And so, yeah, I think a lot of those are just occasionally just going to get like flagged, and it kind of stinks because if you're a fan, you're just like watching, man, what a great play. Oh God, now that's illegal.
Well, and you feel bad for the player who's going, well, what the hell am I supposed to do? Because if you give the offensive player
in midair, am I supposed to stop?
Slow
down in midair?
Let me tell you who'd love to have passing posture. That Lorenz kid who was at Kentucky about 20 years ago, who was the size of a Mack truck.
Yeah, exactly.
I think they landed planes on this guy. Yeah. I mean, he was massive. Was he like 6'7", 300 pounds?
He was 300 plus. I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, guy from the secondary knocks into him. He bounces off, and it's like, so you're going to give this guy an advantage. And I get, it. And again, it's better than it was. I'll put it that way.
And also, I think just it's funny. You sometimes you hear like the conspiracy theories. It's like, oh, what's the LA media market? And I don't think that really applies. I mean, it's like, what was Hanlon's razor? Never attribute to malice that which be adequately explained by stupidity. Yeah, and I think that's like very relevant in this case. No, they weren't doing this just because it was LA. They just did because they screwed up and they just couldn't admit it.
Yeah, and everyone just doubled down, and we go on to the next pseudo controversy next week in officiating.
Yeah, exactly.
That could actually, impact the outcome of a game.
Yeah, exactly.
Because once people start losing money in gambling, then it's a thing.
That's when it's a thing. Yes, when your FanDuel account starts, withering because of these calls, then that becomes the actual issue. So we're speaking of Indiana. When we come back, we will discuss IU. Their great start, and I guess we'll say, is this really happening for Indiana? Back when we come back on X's and Joes.
So we're back, and IU's been 3-0 before in our lifetimes. IU's been 3-0.
Rarely, but it happens.
Rarely, at least in the last 25 years. Mm-hmm. But I will say something feels a little different about this.
It does. It's strange. I was texting with somebody about this, and they were asking me, these were, not IU fans. They were like football observers and said, oh my God, you guys actually look pretty good.
Yeah.
And we both kind of agreed when we were talking is that watching IU and knowing that how many of these guys are like, quote unquote, new, they're literally first year starters at IU. They played like one of those teams in the 80s that looked like they'd played together since freshman year.
Right.
And now they're just coming into their fourth year as seniors. And this is like their big payoff season where they just look like totally locked in terms of everyone knows what each other's doing. The quarterback knows exactly where the wide receiver is going to break. The running back knows exactly how the left guard and left tackle are going to like pull and like, hit out on the outside linebackers. It's just like, it has that kind of feel. It's like, dang, these guys are really, it's strange to see a team that's kind of been like thrown together in terms of their starters. And the first 3 games, they have no fumbles and no interceptions. Just statistically speaking, that's not common, let's say.
They punted the ball 1 time in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And we remember the days when Alan Stokowski was considered the hero of the IU offense.
Yes, exactly.
Alan, wherever you are, you're hell of a nice guy.
Yeah.
great punter, but
that was always I always hated that back in like when IU was really bad. Because, again, like as someone that followed recruiting as closely as I did in football and basketball, when you look at like the top players at like each position and the schools they're looking at, you look at running back. Okay, now we're saying IU. None of the quarterbacks, none of the wide receivers, none of the top D linemen, linebackers. They get to the punters, like two of the top 5 punters. Oh yeah, I'm looking at IU.
Right.
Where else am I going to get that many punts in my 4-year career, so I can show the NFL plenty of game film.
A year ago, didn't we land like the country's best long snapper?
We did. Agreed. Yes, exactly.
And we agreed you're going to get a lot of work here if things don't change.
Don't worry, kid.
you're gonna be doing 20 of these a game.
Your arm is going to get very tired at IU.
You're going to love it.
Snapping. Yeah.
But I think it's as there's a plan. I mean, I think the word that I'm not going to dog Tom Allen at all. It just didn't work. And that pivot that he had to make was so difficult to make when you are doing what he had to do the way that he had to do it. And you go back to Cam Cameron, where the words belief come into play, that we have to get there and we have to celebrate the little wins. Those little wins, maybe not getting blown out by a Big Ten, by a premier Big Ten opponent. Maybe those little wins are we played a great first half. Maybe the little wins are, well, we just didn't get it on 4th and 1 and inside the 20 to get the touchdown to win the game. And the idea of moral victories. And when you've had a program like Indiana where the words ineptitude, I think you can rationally say that the program for a long period of time has suffered long bouts of ineptitude.
Yeah.
When we talked about the 79 Holiday Bowl, that was their first bowl win.
Yeah.
And then the only bowl, and then Mallory had a few here and there. From 87 to 93, 86 to 93, we had, I think, 5 or 6 bowl appearances and a couple, 3 more wins.
Yeah.
And then it just fell apart. And statistically, so now so every new coach, there's a different twist on the word belief.
Yeah.
Rebuild. We have to build ourselves to be a winner. We have to get ourselves in a position to learn how to be one.
Yeah.
And I'm not, Terry Hepner in particular, I think, tried to go in with the same attitude Curt Cignetti is, where we're going to do this now. But I think he, just had to kind of go into that sort of, but I still think there was that sort of, we need to build a culture that believes that we can do this.
Yeah.
Hepner
was definitely like a culture guy and sort of an attitude guy. Like really had to kind of sell things, and he was kind of interesting. He was kind of he had a little bit of Allen in him in some ways.
And there was that where you have to buy into this, whatever this is.
Yeah.
And buying into it was more of an emotional appeal that went to the players, but also went to the fans.
Yeah.
Allen probably did it about as well as anybody by getting them to where they ended up.
Yeah.
But
put on to the on-field performance that justified the
the moment in 2021 where he needed to pivot from being a believe guy to a competence. It's about I'm not even competence. It's basically you go from faith to being somebody who can just kind of just get it done. And you just have to you call it maturization is probably the word to use.
Yeah. You have to manage the program that you've built to make sure that doesn't slip. And some guys just don't really always get that right.
Moses gets you to the banks, doesn't carry you over.
Yeah.
And you kind of saw that where, okay, we're still making decisions like these guys feel like they need to believe they can do it. They've already done it. They've been doing it for the last 2-3 seasons. Maybe the time now is to go on where we need to now to go to the next level. We need to take the next step, which the next step is, we know what we're doing. We're going to make the right decisions. We're going to make the correct decisions. We're going to follow a plan. We're going to do this strategically. We're going to put the pieces in place we need to put in place. It's not a thing where, and nothing wrong with Leo as a concept, but Leo is not a management strategy.
Yeah. It's a saying. It's not something that actually wins games in the end of the day. So
that's the difference with Cignetti. I see that it's more like he doesn't have a manifesto, but he actually has a plan book.
Yeah. I think Cignetti's interesting. I mean, I was fortunate just living in Pennsylvania to see him, and his dad basically built, Indiana University of Pennsylvania football. I mean, it's like, he is like the Bear Bryant of IUP football. And that's like a side note. I think the existence of IUP justifies IU swiping the word "the" away from the clutches of Ohio State. Because there's no other Ohio State university in the United States. But there is another Indiana.
There is another, yeah.
And I believe living out in Pennsylvania, how many times I've had awkward conversations. It's like, where do you go to school? I went to IU. Oh, I went to Indiana. Oh, my daughter's out there. Oh, that's lovely. Yeah, we just drove out there the other day. Oh, really? Yeah, we just took the 2-hour trip. I'm like,
no, wrong Indiana.
Oh, that one. And then when I had to clarify, it's like, and they're like, well, what dorm were you at? I was like, McNutt. It's like, no, I went to the other Indiana University, the Indiana University.
The one with 47,000 students, the one that's in the Big Ten. The one that Penn State used to beat up on. Oh yeah, that one. Yeah.
No, but no, I was fortunate enough. I got to kind of know Cignetti family, just like from a distance, watching, some of their old teams, and I followed James Madison. So yeah, it's interesting. I kind of knew about him. I had pretty good thoughts about him being hired at IU, just because, he's kind of a winner, and my theory of opposites, I guess theory applies here.
Yeah.
I've talked about this before. I think I've maybe talked about it on the pod before, but if I've not, just explain.
Oh, you have. No.
Okay.
Yeah.
So basically, athletic directors tend to hire coaches that are the exact opposite of the guy they just
guy they brought in. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of it, that even happens in politics and all sorts of other things and corporations. The guy that just got let go, or gal, or whoever, the person making the hire typically is thinking, I don't want to do that again. And the people I represent don't want to see that again. And so, if you went to a lab and say, okay, bring me design a coach from scratch that is the exact opposite temperamentally and strategically from Tom Allen, I think Curt Cignetti would probably pop out of the chute.
I think you're right.
Because you think about he's definitely the opposite of Allen in terms of just his presentation.
Yeah.
He's more of an no nonsense offensive minded kind of guy, whereas Allen's more like the defensive kind of guy, and the rah personality. So yeah, I think it's a perfect encapsulation of the theories. They had this guy that kind of had all these traits over here. Now they have the guy that has all these traits over here. And yeah, it's interesting. I just kind of enjoy watching Cignetti football. When it was at James Madison, they were just kind of fun to watch, pretty modern-ish. Mm-hmm. One thing you notice about teams that are well coached, there's just these little small indicators that maybe fans don't really pay attention to, but if you really fall football a lot, you kind of notice them. And at least so far, one thing I've vaguely noticed, and I'm certainly not a football expert like some people, but I've talked to other football people, and they said, yeah, I noticed that too, is that watch IU play now compared to the past in terms of where the receivers run to.
Right.
Notice how often IU is not in 3rd and 4th and 1.
Right.
Notice how often they're getting to the sticks, making the catch, and settling down on the right side of the 10-yard marker.
Right.
How many times, like in the past, you watch IU, it would be like, 3rd and 9, the wide receiver runs to the sticks, the passes comes in, and to make sure, to really secure it, they take one step forward, catch it, get hit, 4th and 1. You notice how often IU kids, the receivers, are intentionally going like 1 extra yard or a yard and a half beyond the sticks, making the catch. Even if they go forward just a little bit, secure it, they're basically always like coming down.
You're building a cushion, right? You're building the cushion, and that's that's
something that happens naturally. That's something that coaches really do, and also let's give the players credit. You have to have like smart, dedicated players to do that. They have to like notice, like, okay, my periphery, my eye, my eyesight, I can see where the yard marker is.
Guys who know their job. That's I think again, it goes back to that sort of aptitude, competence, professionalism, clinical, all these words. Scott Poulter, a good friend of ours, was sitting over here on the couch with his boys watching that UCLA game with me, and it was just fun watching them watch IU for the first time. I said, Scott, how is this different? And he's like, I don't think I've ever seen an IU team just this professional.
Yeah.
And how they approach things. I mean, like, how many times would an IU coach have lost their mind, had even on the targeting call on the defensive lineman? Yeah. Either lighting him up at that moment or after the call we were talking about earlier, just losing, trying to show I got to show these guys I'm fighting for them.
Yeah.
Cignetti's just like, next play.
Mm-hmm.
Stop them. Next play. Yeah. You know what? Yeah, we got screwed. You know what? Now, what are we going to do to screw them?
Yeah.
And it's like if you study the Civil War, it's Grant.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Grant, wins everywhere he's gone. Well, he was winning. He only won in Kentucky. I don't know if he can win in the Mississippi River at Vicksburg.
Yeah.
He won at Shiloh. Yeah, well, that's a bloody battle. So anybody could have won that game. Yeah, Vicksburg. Yeah, it's just a siege. Okay, yeah, maybe. He's a drunk. He's this. He's that. Yeah. I'm not sure he can. He can't beat Robert E. Lee. He can't beat Bobby Lee. Bobby Lee going to do this. Bobby Lee going to do that. Grant just said, go forward.
Yeah.
And you have to respect a guy, and again, so it's kind of the same idea, which is next play, next battle, next move.
Yeah.
I'm not going to play.
It's a long-term game, and you have to play to the long term.
You have to play the long term. And so I think the thing that I was most excited about, after the first, it was like, he's going to bring up what's wrong first. You get those halftime interviews, and he's like, this UCLA. Yeah, well, we're 3 for 3 now, not stopping a team from scoring at the end of a half.
Yeah.
We're going to have to teach them. We didn't do a very good job, picking up, against Florida Atlantic with Florida International.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we had 2 really great series, and we just basically lost our focus. We can't afford to do those things. Just little things that he brings. He basically is looking at, okay, so he's every win, it isn't a celebration, and let's all celebrate like we did something. We know we did something. It's a nice win. We are going to enjoy it for 24 hours, and we're going to go fix the crap that we did wrong.
Yeah,
that's what a championship program looks like.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's it was great. I guess just the fact that the venue was what it was. Just thinking about, like, how many decades have you heard IU fans talking about? I would just like to see IU play in the Rose Bowl. Obviously, when they said the Rose Bowl, they were describing an event, not a location. So, but the location still does matter, because that's part of it. It's part of the event. So it's
the last time IU went to the Rose Bowl to play, Betty White was like young and doing the parade. Willard Scott wasn't even doing the parade at that point. Willard Scott was not yet big enough of a celebrity to do the parade. It was like Betty White and Alan Ludden or somebody doing the doing the Rose Bowl parade in living color.
Yeah, and the USC starting running back was
O.J. Simpson
pre-fame. Yeah,
before he got famous doing that Avis commercial. That's what we're talking about, right, Mike? Yeah, exactly. And a few other things.
Yeah,
but that that was hell. That was before we were born. When you think about that weird, untimely, that weird, and even then the season was considered to be a weird season.
Yeah, It was.
It was a little out there. Just a lot of things that break. A lot of good luck.
Yeah.
I
thought it was great. I mean, just for the fans, I think I mean, how many friends did we have out there? I mean, like Bo Haynes, our last guest. He said on the show, he flew out there and he texted me while I was out there. He sent me pictures. So it's.
I was talking to a guy that was out there today, and Robert was saying that it's like it was just, and I mean, we still had he's exhausted. He's flown back from L.A. Take the jet lag. He's back here, and he's running on all adrenaline, but he's just like the energy in that hearing Hoosiers in the Rose Bowl audibly on a broadcast. It's almost like. Did we sell something to some demon?
Yeah, exactly. Some Faustian bargain that's going to catch
up. Right. I mean, is Dun Meadow going to just be a sewer now? I mean, what is it going to? Are we going to see the Jordan River just be a river of blood? I don't know what we did to deserve this, but I could get used to it.
Yeah,
I can get used to this.
Yeah, no, it was cool, and I think just like seeing all the fans out there. I mean, we have some of our network pals out there. I mean, Galen was out there, and one of my favorite things now I notice is that on social media, it seems like fans trying to find Galen has now become kind of like a Where's Waldo challenge.
Where's Galen?
I found him. They post pictures of Galen, like look at this. Oh yeah, well that's me. He's kind of looking, I think that's great that people have now like incepted that into their football experience. Like, okay, got my beer, got my popcorn. Where's Clavio?
Where's Clavio?
Well, another funny thing. I don't know if you were like following this. I mean, some of our network friends, the fans of the show and all the network shows, but they were tweeting about traffic in Los Angeles. And I think for a lot of them, it was the first time they've ever got to experience the joys and wonders of Los Angeles County traffic.
I was telling been out there for that? No. And so the on the grand strategy, we're going to take Bennett out to Disneyland sometime around 5 or 6.
Good.
Because I feel like Disneyland is better for a kid that age than doing the full Orlando experience, which I think is more of an 8-9-year-old thing.
Possibly, yeah.
That will probably be my first foray out into into that into LA.
Yeah,
and meet up with some people and kind of do some stuff. But I mean, I was talking to talking to this kid Robert today, who's working with us over at Columbus North, and he was out there and he was like, Bob, I spent $20 on a burrito.
Yeah, that's cheap.
I thought we were gonna get cheap.
Spend a lot more if you wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about $1 million homes and homeless people sleeping across from. It's a different vibe, and he was saying that some guy was somebody that meet up with this. So, dude, you out here to club? No, we're here for a football game. Man, you can watch that at home. Why would you come out? Why would you fly out here for a football game? I'm like.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so he's just, he's like kind of going, man, this is LA. Randy Newman said it best. I love LA. I mean, people really like the place.
There are parts, I mean, I like certain parts of California. I mean, I love like Monterey and other places. And there are parts of LA I like and other parts not so much. But the traffic is just like its own sort of beast. I always explain the difference. Like on the East Coast, if you're on, let's say, like the Long Island Expressway, you'll drive for a while and you'll come to a complete stop.
Right.
And you won't move for like 3 minutes. And then you'll get going again. And you'll be like, all right, we're moving in. And then you'll stop again after another minute or two. It's just this constant like go, stop for a while.
Yeah.
And then go.
Right.
Los Angeles traffic, it's like it's like water torture. Yeah. It is 4 miles an hour for like an hour until you get past whatever is like blocking your way, whether it's like another, it's like the 405 interchange or whatever. It's just like this constant droning slowness where you're never stopped, but you're never really going either.
I remember a couple of years ago driving out of the Newark airport and realizing that I had to be aggressive to get, because if you tried to let people in, you had to just get on the bumper and just stay going.
Yeah, exactly. And don't signal because that just tips them off that you're about to get.
Exactly.
Like,
Don't what? Yeah, we need to keep the element of surprise, says General Sherman. But yeah, I've heard that about LA, where it's almost like it's this weird sort of almost luggage carousel of traffic, where if you do that out there, it's almost like and then I mean the road rage is just it is what it is. I mean it's just people just losing their mind. It's different. It's
different, yeah. But like I said, California is lovely in some parts and not so much in others. It's just like a lot of other states, it has its good and bad. But like I said, I think it's really cool. Everyone got to have that experience, at least once in their life. And
to kind of and we'll be out there again, in the next decade. I think we'll get another game out there. We'll at least do the Coliseum in 2027, I think, or something like that.
Yeah.
But and eventually we'll do Oregon. It's going to be interesting to see kind of how all this plays out over the next, really over the next 5-10 years.
Yeah.
That being said, my brother-in-law, I had to send him a text message yesterday from the golf course because I was just sitting in there waiting on some guys to finish up on the hole. And I'm like, I need to text Bill. Speaking of my Newark thing.
Yeah.
He's an Ohio University grad. So I just sent him a screenshot of the score and thanked him for the use of it, thanked him for his quarterback.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like we're putting him to good use in Bloomington.
Exactly. I find when I do that with my James Madison associates, they're far less cordial,
hospitable about it. Yeah,
exactly. When I thank them for all the many great players they've sent our way, they tend to give me a little bit of different response.
Yeah, I have a feeling that James Madison, when Cignetti left, it was like everyone was trying to get out with him, which is always a great sign.
Yeah.
Like when all of your players want to follow you to your next job.
Yeah.
You might be okay.
Yeah. I just love, us being like, history folks, James Madison, just the idea of hearing the word James Madison is pissed at you. I just think literally I think of 5'3" James Madison, the man actually getting rid of
But I'm not even a red coat.
Yeah.
I didn't burn his house down. What are you saying here?
Exactly.
No, or mine is okay. Well, I'm Alexander Hamilton's a pretty cool dude.
Yeah.
On that. So yeah, let's we'll enjoy this while it lasts. But from a football standpoint, there's a lot to like, and
the season's new, and there's sure,
there's hope.
There certainly will be
there's hope.
Yeah, there certainly will be times this year where, you might have some down games, some kind of loss, or something's going to happen. It's like, oh, damn it, that. But I think it's just, taking the long perspective of, this is a lot different than maybe what you're used to as IU fans, and just kind of savor that part of it. Like, don't start projecting ahead. Like, oh, I think we're going to get X number of wins. Just enjoy the fact that, it's not like what it has been. Just enjoy that part of it.
And I think, again, make a bowl game your first year, keep winning your first year. I like the fact the man has said, this is my last job, that
will help with recruiting too.
That will help with recruiting. And I think you and I over the years have kind of come to this conclusion that, the most volatile time is when you change coaches.
Right.
And getting that hire correct it's like threading a needle in a windstorm. I don't, you are far more likely, and again, our past history has shown this, to strike out over the long haul, over the short term, than you are to get it to actually hit the home run.
Yeah.
If you hit this home run, and let's say that this does turn into a culture evolving, a culture changing, historically trend reversing move by Indiana University.
Yeah.
It'll be a very significant event, and one that I think we're going to look back on, especially with the timing of NIL, the transfer portal, conference realignments, TV deals, Peacock and streaming, and everything in its and its uncle, as well as finally I-69 being close to being completed.
Yeah.
All of these factors, all converging upon the point of, well, we got it right when we needed to get it right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's important to always keep in mind. Yeah, the timing of it is perfect, especially with conference realignment. It is much better to have a functional football program than to not have one right now, because You don't want to be a school that's like, at 2 or 3 wins a year for very long, when conferences are looking to see like, okay, well, who's actually going to bring in some revenue? Who's actually going to be a very competitive program? You don't want to be in the position of thinking, well, what's it going to be like playing with Washington State for the rest of it? You don't want to be in that position.
You don't want to be Washington State and Oregon State standing on the standing on the deck of the Titanic going, where'd the lifeboats go?
Exactly. Where's that music coming from?
It's Fresno State. They're playing ragtime behind us.
Exactly.
On that happy note, well, we want to thank you again for listening, and special thanks to Bob Thompson for the music you hear and the sound of the show, as well as John Rigger of rigdesign.com for designing the logo and the look of the show.
Yep. And looking forward, episode 18, how to be a critical fan. As we discussed before at the beginning of the episode, we'll explore the challenges that fans confront and how to support a team while also looking at objectively at what their team is and what their team isn't. And I think this is one of those pods I think I've been personally looking forward to. It's one of my sort of favorite side topics in sports, which is like, fan psychology and how fans sort of interact with their teams. So look for that one to drop probably maybe like the last week of September. So about 2 weeks from now. So keep an eye out for that one. So until then, this Endless Conversation was brought to you by the Back Home Network. Be sure to check out all the great BHN content, including Assembly Call, Doing the Work, Right Up Meridian, The Dribble Drive, and Crimson Cast on YouTube and BackHomeNetwork.com. So until next time, I'm Mike Weemuth.
And I'm Bob Miles.
Have a good one, everyone.